And we begin with the final days before Israel's Tuesday election, where polls show the parties on the right may have an edge over the center and left-wing parties. That means Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would be asked to form the next government. He has been heavily criticized by blue and white party leader Benny Gantz. Gantz has compared Netanyahu to Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan, and he said Netanyahu endangers Israel's democracy. But this week, the Likud party's number 2 leader, Yuli Edelstein, fought back, saying Gantz doesn't have experience. He accused the former general of trying to take a shortcut to the prime minister's office.
And without having one day of experience in the Knesset, without passing one budget, without opposing or supporting one controversial legislation, the person thinks that he can really start ruling everything, especially in a country like Israel, with all the challenges together.
Well, CBN News senior editor John Wagi joins us from Jerusalem to give us the latest on the Israeli elections. John, the closing polls seem to be mixed. Some show Netanyahu in the lead, and others show Gantz's party getting more seats. So why are some people saying that looks good for Netanyahu?
Well, it's interesting, Heather. I've got a prop here with me. This is today's Jerusalem Post, and the headline reads, "Final poll predicts easy win for right." That kind of says it, at least how the thinking goes before the voters go to the polls. The reason for that is you have 120 seats in the Knesset, and you need a governing majority of 61 seats. And so say the top 2 parties finish with 30 seats each. They've still got to get 31 seats from other parties, smaller parties, and the right has a lot easier task of accomplishing that than the center-left does. And so that's why they seem to be indicating that it could be good results Tuesday for Netanyahu.
You know, it's interesting, John, because, of course, for months Netanyahu has had a cloud of indictment hanging over him, but he's actually leading. You know, how does that all come together?
Well, one of the reasons for that, I think, Heather, is that actually Israel's in pretty good shape right now as a nation, and they've had 10 years of Netanyahu as prime minister, 10 straight years. That's more than we'd ever get for a U.S. president. And as a result, we've got things like big changes on the move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, the scrapping of the Iran deal, the U.S. recognizing the Golan Heights, plus Israel really reaching out to other nations with its technology, its water ability to do drip irrigation and kind of water resources and other things. I mean, Netanyahu's been very successful. They just opened an embassy in Rwanda just in the past week. And so you have that too, and even quiet negotiations going on with other Arab nations. So a lot in Netanyahu's corner for what he's actually accomplished as prime minister. There's definitely some Bibi fatigue in Israel. After 10 years of any prime minister, you're going to have that. Plus, you have the cloud of indictments. So we don't know which way the results are going to go for sure, but those are things in his favor anyway.
And as you've been alluding to, you know, election night, of course, doesn't decide everything in Israel. Talk about how the new government will be, you know, delayed possibly for weeks or even months.
Yeah, what happens, Heather, is that once the results are in, the president of Israel, who's really a figurehead, a kind of ceremonial leader of the country, invites all the parties who have done well in the election and says to them, who do you think should be the one to form a government? Now, that person, when that person is chosen, he or she has 28 days to get a coalition together. If they don't get it, they have 14 more days. They can petition for 14 more days or so, maybe 18 days, to get a coalition formed. If that doesn't happen, it goes back to the drawing board. And so it's going to take weeks to find out who, not necessarily who will be the prime minister, but whether the winner can get a coalition together to lead the country.
Fascinating. And John, just a quick preview. We've got Jerusalem Dateline tonight. What's going on?
Right. Well, this week we will have a roundtable to give a little more extended coverage of these Israeli elections. Also, you know, Heather, it seems like It's 2 or 3 times a week now we get archaeological reports of some new dig that shows the Bible's connection to Jewish history and everything. This one's about the fall of Babylon in 586 BC, so Chris will have a story on that. And people here are very interested in the lunar spacecraft, the Bereshit, which means Genesis, and we're looking for the moon landing for the Israeli craft to become the 4th nation to land a craft on the moon, and so that's pretty exciting here as well.
No shortage of news. John Waggy from Jerusalem, thanks for your time. And you can see Jerusalem Dateline tonight at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel.